Now, tonight is Saturday night, and that means once again another demonstration at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv is taking place. Family members, citizens, and even those outside of Israel are all calling on the government to reach a deal and secure the release of the remaining hostages. One of the speakers at tonight's rally is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt. Our correspondent Zach Anders is live right now in Hostages Square with Greenblatt. Zach, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nicole. Well, I-24 viewers may have seen Jonathan Greenblatt before. He joins us remotely. It's great to have him here in person.
Thank you.
Going to be one of the speakers tonight at this rally that is expected to pull thousands. And I mean, these scenes are always so emotional, intense.
Yeah.
Walk me through tonight and this speech that you're prepared to give, and what is it that the message that you'll be bringing?
Well, look, the ADL is the oldest anti-hate organization in the United States. It was founded over 110 years ago to focus on fighting anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. And we know that anti-Semitism drove what happened on 10/7, the dehumanization of men and women, boys and girls, that genocidal attack in the south of Israel. So I'm here tonight at this rally to, number one, talk about the anti-Semitism that drove that massacre and that unfortunately is flaring up in the United States today. I'm also here to bring a message that I think Israel needs to hear, that us in the American Jewish community and around the world are focused on bringing the hostages home. So we think it is imperative that once and for all these people who are still kidnapped and held in tunnels under Gaza come back home, including not just the Israeli citizens of all walks of life, but the American citizens who are still there. This is an American problem as much as it is an Israeli problem.
When I understand it, you went down to the south, to Be'eri, somewhere I saw in the early days as well. Emotional?
It's so hard, Zach. I was at Be'eri yesterday. I was at Kfar Aza a few months ago, and the scenes there are wrenching.
And they're still there, which is so incredible.
They're still there.
Yeah.
And, you know, the damage that was wrought. And you can see clearly RPGs that hit like one-bedroom apartments. You can see the bullet holes in the walls of children's bedrooms. You can see the ashes and debris from homes that were burnt down with the residents still inside. I mean, this isn't war. This is, again, what a genocide looks like.
One of the things that blew me away in those early days was walking through Be'eri, seeing a building that had the side of the wall blown off, but the table was still set.
Yeah.
So the explosion blew the wall out, but you could still have the table and the cups and the plates still in place.
It's really shocking, and I don't think Americans or people around the world really understand what happened there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're gaslighting Israel and the Jewish people broadly, the 10/7 denialism. I mean, think about it. It took decades for Holocaust denialism to happen. It took just days for October 7th denialism to happen.
How widespread do you think that is in the States right now? Because we still see the numbers. 80% support Israel.
Look, the overwhelming number of Americans, the overwhelming number of people paying attention support Israel. But, you know, there's noise coming from certain quarters, particularly on our college campuses, that sort of, again, gaslights and warps the reality and it confuses you.
When you were speaking at Brown, I think there was some college demonstrators that left and disrupted your speech.
Yeah.
Just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you, Zach, I have been to Brown, and in the last few weeks I've done roundtables at Penn, Harvard, Columbia, USC, and I hear the same story at all these schools. Jewish students who explain how they don't feel safe walking across their campus anymore if they're wearing a yarmulke. Jews who feel like they have to go into the closet and hide their identity rather than being their whole selves. I mean, this is abhorrent. You should not be harassed because of your faith. You should not be menaced because of your nationality. So we're really at ADL, you know, we launched a report card grading universities on how they are handling anti-Semitism. We've been facilitating the ability of students to file claims, to litigate against the schools. We have to take action. We can't stay, you know, we just can't stand idle.
Does the ADL mission look any different since October 7th?
Well, the mission of fighting anti-Semitism remains central, but it's a relevant question because the priorities have just changed. So we're focused on college campuses today in a way that we weren't before. We're focused on disrupting the extremists. I mean, for a long time, we fought white supremacists, neo-Nazis. Today, unfortunately, we find ourselves fighting, you know, radical anti-Zionist groups and kind of neo-Marxist organizations. They've always been on our radar, but today they're really front and center.
And when you say really front and center, loud minority, sure, but I mean, this is turning violent in some spaces.
No
How do you
question.
combat that?
Well, number one, I think we ask people in positions of authority like university presidents not to make concessions to people who break the law, but to apply consequences. So a kind of moral consistency is really what we want. Simply equal treatment for Jewish students, Jewish victims, as it were. So number one, hold these people accountable when they transgress, when they overstep, when they break the law. Number two, make sure Jewish students and make sure Jewish institutions get the same equal treatment that everyone else gets. That's it.
I mean, we're a bit in that fallout period from Columbia's demonstration has now been taken down.
Yeah.
Has there been consequences for students that were spray painting the sides of buildings, breaking windows?
There have been some examples, like at Harvard. I think there were 13 students who were prevented from graduating. There was a great deal of protest, but President Garber held firm, which was really important. On the other hand, at some other places like Northwestern, there have been no consequence of people who've broken the law. That's why Northwestern got an F on our report card, and that's why Northwestern's president, Michael Schill, was held accountable this week in Congress. He was grilled by Elise Stefanik and others for the terrible job that he's done. And unfortunately, I say this as an alumni of Northwestern, we've called for his resignation for this reason.
If we can, let's shift gears to, we've got one long summer coming up with this election cycle.
Yeah.
What do you think this is going to look like? And Jewish issues being brought into the campaign cycle, do you think the candidates are going to avoid it because of how hot this is the third rail of politics a bit? But we see Trump addressing it head on and making some claims about Netanyahu. I mean, is this going to consume the election cycle?
I think, as it were, I think there are a couple factors, right? So most Americans do not want to talk about what's happening in Gaza. They want to talk about what's happening at their kitchen table, right? Americans are concerned about inflation, about jobs, about, the basics of, again, putting bread on the table. That being said, there's a noisy minority of anti-Israel, pro-Hamas types who I think are going to try to seize the conversation and grab the narrative around the Democratic Convention in Chicago. It'll be interesting to see how President Biden, who's been so good on so much, if he and the Democratic Party can keep their agenda on the straight and narrow and not let extremists kind of kidnap it, if you will. I think from the Republican side, you're going to see similar pressures, except these will be pushing President Trump to be even tougher on the pro-Hamas types, even tougher standing behind and supporting Israel. So I think the issues of the Middle East, while they might not be, again, what most Americans care about, even the young people, by the way, there was a poll 2 weeks ago that showed, despite all the noise from these college campuses, less than half of 1% of students are involved in these protests. And even more so, this issue is dead last on the priorities of young people in America. But again, there's a hardcore group of extremists who are going to do everything they can to try to seize the narrative, to try to hold hostage the debate. I think you're going to see that play out this summer.
One of my closing thoughts would be, you were an advisor under the Obama administration.
Yeah.
If you're in the room now with President Biden's advisors and they're looking at the numbers and they're looking at Michigan and Pennsylvania where they know there's going to be a loud chorus, like you mentioned, of people that are calling for the immediate ceasefire, and that's going to last through the election cycle. How do you navigate this issue? How do you...
So I worked with President Biden when he was vice president. I know many of the people around him. And the advice that I'm giving them, Zach, in private, I'll say it right here in public, stay the course. Americans don't want to see the president sort of capitulate to activists, whose heads are wrapped in scarves.
Do you think he's done that to this point?
I think he's been very solid. I didn't agree with the way some of the messaging came out or some of the ideas about providing arms for Israel as they were preparing to go into Rafah. That being said, look, President Biden has been stalwart and he needs to not capitulate to a small group. So if I were advising him, I would say stay the course. Americans don't want to see our country get behind kidnappers, get behind terrorists. So again, we should have compassion for people being killed in Gaza. Our hearts should break for every civilian who gets killed, Zach. But we should remember it is Hamas that needs to be held accountable for those deaths. It is Hamas that needs to be, gotten rid of. It is Hamas that needs to release the hostages now. And I think, again, most Americans, the vast majority on the left and the right, young and old, agree with that sentiment.
And to close, we've got the crowds growing here. You're set to speak soon. Israel and the issues that it's going to face going forward. We still have over 120 hostages inside Gaza, 230 days now. What Where does things go from here? I mean,
First of all, it's heartbreaking. I mean, we almost become inured to the fact that there are over 100 people still being held hostage over 230 days. I mean, it's wrenching to me. Look, I think we've got to keep the pressure on. Again, I don't think you can give in to terrorists. That's exactly what they want. I think Israel needs to do the job in Rafah, and these individuals, these boys and girls, these men and women, the elderly, the wounded, they need to be released now.
Have you had a chance to speak with any of the families?
Many times, yeah.
What are you hearing from them?
Look, I think they are racked with grief, but they are ferociously hopeful. They're frustrated, I think, by there isn't more progress, and yet I think they remain optimistic about their loved ones. And I think the thing that I've told them, that I'll tell you tonight and all the viewers, is, I mean, we're far away in the United States. But, you know, I wear this dog tag every day in every meeting with every government official, every time I'm on television, because I believe in Am Yisrael Chai. And the people being held in Gaza, those are my brothers and sisters too, and I'll do everything I can with every ounce of energy they have in my body to help get those people free.
Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach.
Jonathan Greenblatt of the Anti-Defamation League. Nicole, back to you.
Zach Anders, thanks so much for that in-depth interview. We'll be certainly looking forward to hearing from Greenblatt as well as all of the other speakers at tonight's rally. Thanks so much.